Later on in this course, I'm going to show you how you can insert new return tracks and start building chains of different effects on them to create quite powerful effects in your music. But for now, what I want to do is take some more baby steps in the whole process of music production in live, and I want to talk to you about how we can mix individual tracks. So take a look at this bass. We're going to solo this bass line. What we have here is a preset in an instance of this synth called analog here. This is one of the instruments available to you if you're using the standard or suite version, and you can buy this individually from Ableton Live's website, ableton.com I should say. However, we're not doing anything in terms of controlling this bass after the signal comes out of the analog synth. So we're not doing anything to mix this bass really. And if you want to get a lot more control over it, there are several audio effects which are commonly used in mixing individual tracks. So the first one I want to show you is EQ. You'll see in your audio effects you have EQ8 and EQ3. EQ3, if we double click on it, loads down here in our devices chain, and you can see that it's quite a basic EQ plugin. We have the ability to mute the low frequencies, the mid frequencies, or the high frequencies. And we can change the crossover points between the mid and high and between the low and mid frequencies. So you can solo just the lows. Then we can solo just the highs. And so now the mids will play between 150 Hz and 1.33 kHz. This button here controls the slew rate, or the angle of the slope at these cutoff points. Do we want them to be sloped so that they're 24 decibels per octave or 48 decibels per octave slopes? Don't worry about that concept if it's confusing you right now. As you go on through your musical journey, you'll get a better understanding of it. So EQ3 is lovely, but it's kind of basic. So 99% of the time you'll be using EQ8. This is what EQ8 looks like. We have 8 different poles that we can activate here using this filter activator. And for each of these poles, let's take a look at pole 1. We can control its frequency, we can control its gain, positive and negative. We can control its Q, or its width, otherwise known as resonance. And this will affect the sound. And if you click on this chooser here, we have different filter modes. So we have a 4 times low cut, which gives us a very steep cut at 48 decibels per octave, the angle of the slope here. And this will give you a very extreme cut here. Most of the time you'll probably just go with the regular low cut, which gives a 12 decibels per octave slew rate. And it cuts off all the frequencies below this cutoff frequency. We then have a low shelf. Low shelves can be useful for boosting lower frequencies in the sound. We can change the Q here. We can also reduce the level of the lower frequencies like this, if the low frequencies are too loud. So that's a low shelf, very useful. We have also this option here, which is what we call a bell. So a bell just boosts in a certain region, or attenuates. Attenuation or attenuate means to reduce, and you'll hear that term a lot in music production. We also have a notch, which completely removes a certain range of frequencies, and the Q level will increase the width of that notch. you can get some lovely subtle effects with a notch filter, especially when you automate the frequency and make it move. We then have a high shelf. So this can be useful for boosting the higher frequencies of a sound. We then have a low pass or a high cut. Probably the most common type of filter that you hear on a sound when they automate the filter. A very useful tool indeed. And we have a 4 times low pass or high cut. Cool. Okay, so you get the general concept of how EQ8 works. I'll change this back to a bell. Click on here to reset that gain level. We also have this audition mode here. So when you enable this, clicking and holding on the filter dot allows you to hear only that filter's effect on the output. So if we click on this, everything turns blue, and we're only hearing this filter's effect on the output. When I release my finger from the cursor button on my mouse, we're out of auditioning that. So that's very useful. We also have analyze. So when this is enabled, the output spectrum is shown in EQ8's display. We can turn that off. Most of the time it's on. You can expand EQ8 to get a closer look at what is happening in the frequencies. We have different modes here. We have stereo. So that means that whatever changes you make in the EQ, it's going to affect both the left and the right channels. We have left and right mode. So this gives you 2 lines. We have an orange line representing the left channel, and if we click on the orange L button here, we now have a yellow line that controls the right channel independently of the left channel. So this gives you a lot of control over the left and right channels independently of each other, which is a very powerful tool. The last mode that I want to show you is mid-side mode. So here we are in our grand piano track. I'm going to load up an instance of EQ8. And here where it says mode stereo, let's change that to mid-side. Now we can edit the sound that comes straight down the center of the stereo field independently of the sound that comes down the sides, or the sound where the left and right channels are playing slightly different frequencies at any one point in time. So when we go to mid-side mode, we have the ability to edit the mid, or click on this button and edit the sides independently, and the orange line changes to yellow in the spectral analyzer. So clicking on this button, so it says M, you can see that we have some good energy coming down the center, and if we click on S, you can see that we also have some energies coming through in the sides. This may not always be a good thing in low frequencies, so we can take this pole 3 here, change it to a low cut, roll off some of those frequencies coming through the sides there. I could even change that to a steeper level like this. It's a 4 times low cut. And I can also make it wider at the top end, which will make it have a nice stereo feel to it. So I can take this pole and change it to a high shelf, boost it, As a general rule of thumb, you can see here we have 100 Hz, 200 Hz and 300 Hz. As a general rule of thumb, you don't want any side information coming through below 300 Hz. possibly even 400 or 500. So that's why it's good practice to use mid-side mode on a lot of certain sounds. You don't have to, but I like to use it quite a lot. Without this EQ on, I can deactivate it. You can hear how much of a difference that is making to the sound. Below there we have adaptive Q. So with adaptive Q enabled, the Q amount increases or becomes more narrow as the amount of boost or cut increases. So this results in a more consistent output volume and is based on the behavior of classic analog EQs. So what does that mean? Well, let's go into mid here. Let's take this pole here. Pole 2, I'm going to boost it. Adaptive Q is enabled, so as I really boost this, you can see that the Q level is becoming narrower. Same with negative values. So that helps with the overall level and is more reminiscent of classic analog EQs. With adaptive Q off, you can see that the Q is not becoming narrower as we get really high or really low with that bell there. So that's a very useful feature. We have scale. So check out the sides. You can see that we're boosting pretty high there. But if I reduce the scale, or boost the scale up to 200%, we can control how extreme our changes are on the sound. If I go into mid mode and boost this, then with scale boosting it up, you can see what's happening there. So that's another very useful feature. And then we have gain below that. So that's an overview of the EQ8 plugin and EQ in general. And in the next tutorial, we're going to talk about compression. So I'll see you in the next video.